I'm gonna move
All
my
right,
Zoom
welcome
window out of
everybody
the
to
way.
the July edition of the Kentuckiana FileMaker Developers Group. This month, well, first of all, let me say a couple years ago, maybe it's a little while back. I don't know if it's been a couple years, but we had Jesse on. Maybe it was last year. Can't remember, but we
I
had
can't
Jesse
either.
Barnum, yeah, from 360Works on, and we had a wonderful conversation that day. It was a great group, great presentation about MirrorSync. And so Jesse is launching the new MirrorSync 7, and we're glad to have him back so he can talk to us about all the new stuff that comes along with MirrorSync 7 and keep us updated on everything that's going on. Real quick, I just want to say if you're watching us on YouTube, you can. We meet the fourth Tuesday of every month at 12:30 Eastern time. So if you'd like to join us in person, all are welcome. Doesn't matter your level, doesn't matter who you know, it doesn't matter who you are. All are welcome to join us live here in person when we have our presentation. So please feel free to do so. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jesse.
All right. Let me see if I can share my screen here. All right. I think that's working, right? You guys seeing me?
Yep.
Okay, great. Hide some stuff, get out of the way. Okay. So MirrorSync 7, I'm Jesse Barnum. I'm the president of 360Works. Um, just a few things before I get started. Number one, I remember last time I presented at your group, you guys had tons of questions, and that made it really fun for me. So I would love you guys to ask questions during this presentation. It's not very fun to just talk to the void. So at any point in which I'm talking, feel free to just unmute and jump in, and it'll be a lot more entertaining than if it's just me talking the whole time. So I do have a Q&A slide at the end, but don't feel like you need to wait till the end. Just jump in at any point. Um, I've got some demos that I'm going to be showing. Some of them are live and some of them are pre-recorded. I just wanted to, I don't want to like trick anybody think I'm doing live videos when I'm not. The pre-recorded ones, the reason I did them as pre-recorded is number one, they're demonstrated on iOS and I'm not running iOS here on my laptop. And second of all, it makes it easier for me to show side-by-side comparisons between MirrorSync 6 and 7. Um, I think I would love it if you guys could go off mute for 1 second and just say something if you have not used MirrorSync before. If you've never used it, speak up now, and it'll give me a good idea of what I should spend more time or less time on.
I have not used it.
Okay, that's good. That's good to
Very
know.
little.
Okay, thank you. So that'll I won't gloss over certain things. I'll make sure to explain them. Um, in my practice demos, this presentation takes about 35 to 42, 43 minutes. So there should be plenty of time, to go into more details and ask questions. So don't be afraid, like I said, to jump in and ask questions as we're talking.
Great.
Um, okay, so a little bit about me. I'm Jesse Barnum. I started 360 Works in 1996. Started FileMaker in 1992 with version 2.1. Um, but I started the business in 96, originally doing IT support for Mac systems, and then gradually got more and more into doing database development, software development. I'm the primary original author of MirrorSync, SafetyNet, Zulu, and a lot of our other products. But MirrorSync is what I spend the most time on. And it's the one that I enjoy working on the most. I've spoken frequently at DevCon, the FileMaker Developer Conference, and a lot of user groups. I do a lot of traveling to speak. I'm excited that this November I'm going to be speaking at Engage U in Antwerp in Belgium, so that's going to be pretty cool. And I love going camping. I love riding motorcycles, and the best thing is when I ride my motorcycle to go camping. Uh, so a little bit about MirrorSync. Um, so MirrorSync is designed for two main purposes. I divide things into server to server syncs and client to server syncs. I'm going to be doing a lot more client to server demos than server server demos, but I do want to talk about the server to server part because it's actually quite a few of our licenses for MirrorSync are for server-to-server purposes. So MirrorSync can sync any of the databases in this bullet point list. There's FileMaker Server, MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, Salesforce, DynamoDB, Redshift, anything with a custom API we can sync to, and anything that is JDBC compatible we can sync to. So there's actually a whole lot more databases than the ones on this bullet point list. And it's not just FileMaker Server either. I mean, you could sync Oracle to MySQL. You could sync Salesforce to Dynamo. You can sync any of these things to each other. And I'll talk a little bit more about some interesting and cool ways that people are using MirrorSync for server-to-server syncs in the next slide. It can also sync, as I think most and many of you guys know, the more common case and the one I'm going to be demoing the most today is syncing FileMaker Pro or FileMaker Go with any of the above servers. It's not just limited to FileMaker Server. You could sync FileMaker Pro to MySQL. You could sync FileMaker Go to Salesforce, whatever you want. And so why do you want to sync databases? Why is that important? How is it beneficial or helpful? And if you want the answer to that, go to any of your hosted solutions, mess around with it, then download a backup copy of that same database and try doing the same things on the copy of the database running on your laptop or on an iPad, on an iPhone, and you'll see a tremendous speed difference between them. So that's one big reason to sync systems, is because when you're working on your own copy of a database, it's like hundreds of times faster. You also don't need to worry about losing your network. You don't need to worry about if the network is slow or fast. You don't need to worry about like putting your device to sleep and then having to reconnect and re-log in, losing all the active sessions and found counts that you're working on. It's just there all the time whenever you turn on the device and go to FileMaker Pro or FileMaker Go. And we can do bidirectional syncs, where changes in the server go down to the client, changes in the client go up to the server. We can also do one-way sync. So you might have a one-way sync for data collection. A very common thing that people use MirrorSync for is for inspections. So they'll go out and they'll inspect chimneys or gas pipes or undersea cables or whatever they're doing, and they'll make notes of that. And then when they get back to having good cell service or good Wi-Fi, they'll sync that up to the server. Another less common use case, but still valid, is a one-way from server to device. That might be somebody who needs to view reports and view activity all the time, and they are traveling, but they still want to be able to see all of the orders that have been placed or all of the work that's being done. And they might want a one-way sync to have a copy of everything that's on the server with them on their laptop or their iPad to be able to view all that stuff. So that's why you might want to do it. I've got some neat examples here that I've actually got. It was hard to come up with just to shrink this list down, but I came up with 4 that I think are pretty neat for server syncs. One, this is actually an ex-employee. He is a race car enthusiast, and he started a business, or he works for a business that makes replacement parts for NASCAR race cars. And they have 6 warehouses in Southern California. And what they found is that it was way faster to run FileMaker Server in each warehouse than it was to have them all share a single connected FileMaker Server over a wide area network connection. And so, yeah.
That's what we just did with the second office we set up for this company I was working with out in Arizona. Their performance was really slow at the second office. So we were setting up a MirrorSync mirrored server there, and they would work on that server there locally, and they'd work on the other server, and they'd keep them in sync using MirrorSync.
That's terrific. Is that live and deployed and working?
No, well, there's a story behind that, but
okay.
But no, it's not live now. It's the company shut down because the owner passed away through.
I remember you telling me about that. That was the carbon monoxide issue, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. Well, if there's anything I can do to help with that, and that's a really tragic story. But if there's anything that you need help from a technical standpoint, if that still is going forward or not, let me know. I'd be happy to jump in and help.
We'll be talking about that.
Okay. But yeah, so that's what they did, is they are running 6 FileMaker servers, 1 in each warehouse, and they use MirrorSync to keep all of them in sync. You'll hear me refer to the words hub and spoke. And so with MirrorSync, we always refer to the one database as the hub, and one or more other databases as the spokes. And those could be multiple. The spokes could be servers, the spokes could be iPads or laptops or phones. But those, we use those terms hub and spoke in MirrorSync. So this is one hub with 5 spoke databases. One of our really old customers has been using it this way for a long time. We added support for Salesforce to MirrorSync. I think it was version 2. And this customer bought MirrorSync way back in the day, and they're still using it as far as I know. And they had a FileMaker system that they used to create itineraries for African safaris. And they added a Salesforce layer to it to do all of their leads management and sales and new business. And then when the customer approves and says, yes, I would like to do this, they use MirrorSync to sync all that data from Salesforce to FileMaker Server, where they will then put together the tour package using all the stuff that they've built in FileMaker to manage that process. So that's a good example of a Salesforce sync. This third example is probably my personal favorite. It's the one I was involved in the most. So Chicago Public Schools has a FileMaker system built by Molly Connolly at Thorson Consulting. And so it's a large comprehensive system for managing selective enrollment programs. So you've got 40 to 60,000 kids per year that apply to all these selective programs to get into in the Chicago Public School system. And the FileMaker system they have manages that whole process of who gets which offers into which programs. The problem that they were having is that when it came time to release those results to the public, they would have 40,000 people all at the same time logging in to see which programs they were accepted to or their kids were accepted to. And they tried using MySQL and that melted down. They tried using Oracle and that melted down. We didn't even think about trying FileMaker because we knew that wasn't going to work. But we used MirrorSync to sync the FileMaker database to DynamoDB. And if you're not familiar with DynamoDB, it's what runs Amazon.com. And then we built a web application that talks to Dynamo. And now it's not even a blip. Like when 40,000 people connect in at the same time to do that, there's no traffic hiccup or anything like that. And all of that is being run off of that little FileMaker database. I shouldn't say little, it's a big database, but FileMaker certainly wouldn't be able to handle that traffic. It's being all run and managed by the FileMaker kind of nerve center that manages all that. And then we use MirrorSync to push and pull all that application data between FileMaker and DynamoDB. And this is a fairly recent one. 360Works hosting customer recently had a problem they came to us about. They have an office in Texas and they have another office in Illinois. And the Illinois office is the main office. And they wanted to have both, they wanted to have a failover system. And so what we implemented using AWS Route 53 is we implemented a DNS failover system so that whichever office you're closer to would be the one you would connect to. And then if one office went down, the DNS would switch so that everybody would be routed to the other server that's up. And then when the server comes back up, the DNS server detects that and reroutes all the traffic so that it's spread across those two servers again. And then we use, sorry, what's that?
Is that new, Jesse? Is that something recent?
This particular use case is recent. It's not using any particularly new features of MirrorSync. A lot of them, so the magic here is really two pieces. MirrorSync is what keeps those servers in sync with each other, but then it's the AWS Route 53 dynamic DNS that implements all that failover logic. So MirrorSync isn't the thing that's routing the traffic from one server to another. MirrorSync is just making sure that those two servers stay identical to each other. And then it's the AWS infrastructure that takes care of measuring the latency from, so if you're in Wyoming, for instance, and you try to connect, everybody gets the same server name. The users don't pick whether they're going to go to Illinois or Texas. They just put in, their FileMaker server address. And AWS is going to measure the speed between you in Wyoming and the server in Illinois and the server in Texas, and it's going to pick which one is faster. And for you, it'd probably, if you're in Wyoming, it'd probably be Illinois. So that's called geo latency measurement with AWS DNS service. And then they have another feature called the AWS Health Check, where if they do an HTTP request and it fails a certain number of times in a row, then they will just treat that server as being down, and they will then publish a different IP address so that all of the people, even if you're in Illinois or Wyoming, you'll wind up going to the Texas server. And then when when, let's say, the Illinois server is down for 2 hours. When it comes back up, MirrorSync sees that it's up and it catches it back up. So all the changes that were made in the Texas server get kind of like restored to the Illinois server. And AWS sees that the Illinois server is back up and it reroutes the traffic again so that it's shared between those two servers. So it's not a new feature, to answer your question. I'm sorry, I kind of over-explained that. It's not a new feature, but it is using a feature of AWS that we haven't always talked about in my webinars before. And then some client to server situations. So everything I just talked about was all server to server syncs. I've got some examples to give you for client to server syncs. This is probably my favorite use of MirrorSync in general. I think it's just really cool. We actually donated the licenses for MirrorSync for this project because it's a really important project. I'm friends with Marty Thomason, who is another Atlanta FileMaker developer, and he's involved with YWAM, which is Youth with a Mission. And what they have is a hospital ship that sails around the coast of Papua New Guinea, and they will take FileMaker Go on iPads and iPhones into remote villages, and they'll do like dental services and optician, is that the right word? Services, and they will do all of that on iPhones, laptops, and iPads. They will then sync those when they get back on board the ship to a FileMaker server running on the ship. And then the server on the ship has a satellite connection, a very, very slow satellite connection, but a satellite connection to a shore-based server in Sydney. And so they're doing this is a combination of client to server syncs as well as server to server syncs. And they will then sync all of that medical data to the server in Sydney. And so we've got a case study about that on our website at mirrorsync.com. But I think that's a really cool thing that they're doing. Probably our largest or second largest MirrorSync customer, they've got about 2,000 devices for MirrorSync. I think it actually is more like 2,500 devices. The company is IMS, and they've built a vertical market application that they distribute on the App Store for emergency first responders, firefighters and EMTs. When they go and they pick up a patient and put them in the ambulance, they're driving at top speed back to the hospital. They can't count on cellular network connectivity. And so they have a system where they enter all that patient vital information. And then when they get to the hospital, they get out of the back of the ambulance and they just sync to the hospital network. The syncs typically take about 6 to 7 seconds to finish. And so by the time that patient is rolling into the hospital, all of their patient information is already there on the hospital servers. And like I said, I think that's like 2,000 to 2,500 devices that they're using for that. And it works extremely well for them. They have a problem like once every 2 years that they'll call me about. This project is done and wrapped up, but it's too cool not to talk about. It's an archaeology team, and they were doing a project in Northern Africa to find this Roman legion that had disappeared in the desert. And so they set up a system of they roped off different dig coordinates, and they have a central tent running FileMaker server. And then each team goes out with mobile devices. And when they find something, they'll photograph it with FileMaker Go, and they'll enter all the documentation about what they found and where they found it. And then they will, at the end of the day, they'll carry all their mobile devices back to the tent and sync all that stuff up to FileMaker server using MirrorSync. And then the last one I'll bring up is not a particularly exotic application, but it's a very important day-to-day one, which is EPB Office Products. They're a small business based in Canada. I got a call from their owner, Cindy, and Cindy travels a lot around the world, and she just wants to be able to have a copy of her data on her laptop with her, so that the employees who are working in the business can do all of their orders and all their inventory, and she can still be connected. But it doesn't matter if she's on a slow network or she's on an airplane or wherever she is. She's able to have all access to all that information and make changes to all of it and sync it up to their server. And I'll point out, sorry, what's that?
I have a client in Colorado that does this with safety supplies, same type of thing.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason that this is an important bullet point, the reason I included it on here, is partly because I think it's maybe not as sexy as the other three, but it's probably closer to what a lot of us need MirrorSync for. And it's also it's notable because it's free for EPB Office products because it's one device. And MirrorSync, whenever you install MirrorSync, it comes for free with one device. And so if you've got a client who's got one person that needs to be able to have a copy of the database and work with it and sync all of it, there's no charge for that for MirrorSync because one device always comes for free with every installation of MirrorSync.
Yeah, I helped him with that on the one in Colorado because we did that 10 user system here in Phoenix with the
Okay.
with the tow trucks. So
I remember you talking about the tow trucks.
yeah.
That's it's fun presenting a second time and kind of tying loose ends from the previous one to things you're talking about now. So let's talk about what is new in MirrorSync 7. Spent a lot of time on doing this stuff, but it all basically breaks down into three categories of stuff. One thing that we focused a lot on is making it easier and faster to deploy offline copies to your users, because I do a lot of the MirrorSync tech support. So I'm in personal contact with a lot of people who use it, and a very common thing is my users can't figure out how to download the files, or it takes too long to run their initial sync, or they're getting confused, or when they're running the initial sync, it takes an hour and their iPad is going to sleep and then it loses the network. So we did a whole bunch of improvements to try to just make this faster, more reliable, and most importantly, easier and harder to screw up for end users who are downloading all these offline copies to work with. So I'm going to demo several of these points. I'll bring up 2 bullet points here that I don't have demos for. One is, so we have this new launcher file, and you'll see the launcher file in a minute. But the launcher file is, if you've used MirrorSync 6 and earlier, you're probably familiar with the concept of a download URL, where you get a URL, you email that URL to your users, they open it on their iPhone, and they click on it, and it gets them a copy of the offline copy from the server by clicking that URL. The problem is that due to things that we can't control in iOS, it's 9 clicks. It's like they have to tap the URL, and then they have to tap the download icon, and then they have to tap the icon of the file, and they have to click share, and then they have to click share to, and then they get a prompt of where they want to open it. It's a lot. And it's not straightforward for every user to figure that out. The launcher file totally solves that, because the launcher file is now 2 clicks. You click on the icon of the file, and then there's one more prompt that says, do you want to open? No, I'm sorry. You click on the icon of the file, and then it pops up with a share thing, and you pick the icon that says open in FileMaker Go. And that's it. And then the file's open and ready for them. So it's dramatic. It might not seem like a big difference, but I've had a lot of positive feedback from customers that I've explained this to, that I mean, the funniest thing is a lot of them, the customer that I've gotten the best feedback from, their clients are all doctors. And they're like, they can't figure this out. So nothing against doctors. I'm just saying sometimes very smart people have a hard time figuring this process out. So the launcher file is a big step in the right direction to making this much simpler for people to get the file. The other thing that's new as a side effect of the launcher file is that in the past, MirrorSync was not able to work with multi-file solutions. So if you had a separation model, that had like a data file and an interface file, or maybe an old legacy file migrated from an old version of FileMaker where there's like a whole bunch of different files for different tables, we were never able to do that with MirrorSync, but now we can, because the launcher file has a list of all the files. And so the user is just getting the launcher file. The launcher file is taking care of downloading all the separate files that they need to open that solution. So that's kind of the easier deployment bullet point there. There's big speed improvements, but I'm not going to dwell on that because I have demos for most of those points.
Jesse, on this deployment thing, that's both SDK as well as FMGO stuff, right?
Yeah. I'm going to show you the SDK thing. It's really cool.
Well, your first one was SDK, so I was confused whether this was just SDK stuff or was both.
It's both. It's so you can use this launcher file to launch it with the FileMaker iOS SDK with Xcode. You can also just simply email the launcher file to a user and they can open it in FileMaker Go. So it'll work both ways. On the developer features, I'm going to show you the sync history database, so I'll talk more about that in the demo. What I don't have demos for is there's now an admin API. The admin API lets you, it's a JSON REST interface to the MirrorSync server, and it lets you do things like trigger a sync, change whether auto sync is enabled or disabled, install a license key, modify a configuration, remove devices, pretty much anything that you can do in the MirrorSync config client, you can do through this admin API. Where I see that being particularly useful is for people that are bundling MirrorSync as part of a solution. And they want to have a simplified installer so that so that there doesn't need to be like a hand-holding screen sharing session to walk them through how to install MirrorSync. So now we have a silent command line installer that can run on Linux. We have this admin API. So if you want to, as a developer, it's totally possible for you to completely automate this process of installing MirrorSync, setting up the license key, adding the configurations, and even modifying the configurations with the host names of whatever the client server is. And then last bullet point, which is not that exciting. Thanks, Kirk. The last point, which is not that exciting, maybe, but it was a lot of work. It was too much work for me to not put it, is that we've rewritten the documentation basically from scratch. So the documentation was just getting really old. We never really properly updated it for 6. It was still largely about MirrorSync 5. So we've done a total overhaul from top to bottom. If you've tried looking up the documentation before and not found what you're looking for, I think it's likely that you'll find it now. And if you don't, please email us and we'll add it. So now we get into some demos. I'm going to start off. I mentioned I have some pre-recorded demos and some live demos. My first demo is a live demo. So what I'm going to show here, let me hide this, is I've got this. This is the sync history database. And I'm going to talk more about it in a little bit, but what I mainly want you to notice is that there's no records in it right now. It's just empty. So I'll come back more and talk about that after I finish my demo. So now I've got FM Starting Point. And FM Starting Point, in case you're not familiar with it, it's a free solution given away by Richard Carlton Consulting. I use it often in my MirrorSync demos because I'm friends with Richard Carlton, and also because I think it's a really cool thing that it's a good base to get started on, and it looks nice, and it looks a lot nicer than anything that I've built to demo stuff. So that's what I'm going to be using for my demo. And I've got 2 records in my contacts table here in Starting Point. And now let me find my files on my other window here. And I'm going to bring over, so I've got this MirrorSync launcher file right here. And it's 815 kilobytes. And it comes with MirrorSync. This is what you get when you download MirrorSync. And so the MirrorSync launcher file is right there. And so I've just made a separate copy of it here at the top level of this folder. So I'm going to open the launcher file. And when you first open the launcher file, it's going to ask you, please put in a download URL. And again, if you are familiar with using MirrorSync version 6 or earlier, you know how these download URLs work. And if you're not familiar with it, the way after you've completed the MirrorSync configuration, you click a download button and it'll generate a URL for you that you can use that URL to give to your customers so that they can get an offline copy by triggering that URL. Now, what we do is you can take that URL. Let me get my version of the URL for the demo. And you can paste it into this launcher file. And now you take this launcher file, and by the way, you can do anything you want to the launcher file. You can rename it, you can reskin it so it looks more like your thing. You can put, whatever messages you want. So this is totally customizable. You can do anything you want to it. I'm going to pretend that I have just emailed this launcher file to my users. And now I'm going to open the launcher file again. This time, because it has the download URL embedded in it, instead of prompting me to do it, it's going to actually download the file. So it's going to start off by asking me to enter in my credentials for Starting Point. So I'm going to put that in. It now does the initial sync on the server. And so while this is running, it doesn't take very long, but while it's running, let me explain what that means. For MirrorSync you can do this, or it's an optional feature to use server-side initial syncs. And what that means is that if you pick the server-side initial sync option, which I did in this example, MirrorSync takes the FileMaker Starting Point database that's hosted on your FileMaker server and makes a temporary copy of it that's also hosted on FileMaker server. It does a server-to-server sync between those 2 databases. Then it takes that temporary database, closes it, and downloads it to your customer, so that by the time your customer gets the file, the initial sync, which is usually the longest, slowest, time-consuming part of this process, is finished. And when they get the file, all they need to do is just run an incremental sync to start using it. So I'm going to open up this file. And so here on my left side of my screen is my server version. And by the way, a trick to tell if it's a server version is if you go to the file menu, if save a copy as is grayed out, that's how you know that it's hosted on the server. Over here, I've got my local version, and I can verify that because save a copy as is enabled. So I know that that's my local copy. So this file is a duplicate of the other one. They're going to have all the same stuff. If I run an initial sync here, I don't expect much to happen. It's going to ask me the first time I run a sync what the name of this device is, and it fills in, my computer name by default. So I hit OK. So that sync was super fast because it was not an initial sync. It was actually just an incremental sync that I was just running for the first time on my device. And it finished it in 1 second. It added a record to an audit log. The way Starting Point works, it creates audit logs all the time. So that's normal. And if I run more syncs, nothing happens. The syncs finish very quickly, 0.5 seconds. I'm not doing anything yet. But you can see that it's very fast to run a sync with no changes. And that's kind of important, because you want your users in the field to sync often. And if it takes 3 minutes to run a no change sync, they're not going to sync often. But if it runs very quickly, they're going to be much more motivated to just sync all the time, which means that the data on their offline device is going to generally be more fresh with the data on your server. So I'm going to do just a quick demo of some basic stuff in MirrorSync. I'm not going to do anything like exotic or exciting, but I'm just going to show you in general how it works. So I've got, again, to reiterate, I've got the server version here. I've got my offline copy here. I'm going to create a new record in my offline copy. I'll create a contact record for myself. And I'm going to run that sync. And it took 1.3 seconds. It added that record to the FileMaker hub node contacts. And there's the record on the server. So if I go, oops. Sorry, clicking around too fast. So if I go in here and I pick a title on the server, and now I run the sync on the client, that updates, and there's my title. So you can see that that's a bidirectional sync. Changes from the offline copy are going up to the server, and changes from the server are going to the offline copy. Let's talk for a second about modifying the same record. So I'm going to go on the server, and I'm going to change Jesse's phone number. I'm then going to go to that same record on the offline device, and I'm going to put in Jesse's email address. And that is my email address. You're all welcome to email me. And now I'm going to run a sync. And you might expect that this would create a conflict, but it does not, because MirrorSync is smart enough to merge these records. So what it did is it saw that I changed the phone number on one with the email on the other, and it merged those two changes together without having to prompt me or ask me or treat it as an error or a problem. Even though I changed the same record on both, it was able to identify which fields changed on which one and merge those changes together. So now let's get a little tougher here. And we're going to change the category and the company on our offline device. And we're going to change the category on our server to hot prospect. So now I've changed not only the same record, I've changed the same field on the same record. So MirrorSync isn't going to be able to merge this because it's not changes to different fields, it's changes to the same fields. So let's see what happens now when I run my sync. Now I get this message, which is expected. The same records were modified both on your local copy and the server for the following tables. And it says one record in the contacts table. So I'm going to click resolve to look at resolving this conflict. That pops open on my other monitor. Let me drag it over to here onto the screen. So this is what you're going to get. what the user is going to see, and this will work fine on, if this is a really small screen, it would work fine on an iPhone or an iPad or a laptop. But this is showing that these fields have changed, and this field in red is in conflict. It was changed on both. So I'm going to click on there, and I'm going to say, oh, okay, on the server 1 minute ago, this was changed to hot prospect. On the client, also 1 minute ago, it was changed to semi-cold. So I'm going to click here to say I want the hot prospect version. I'm going to click the left arrow to say I want the choice on the left. And now I'm going to say I'm finished. It says your selections have been saved to the server. Close this window and rerun your sync script to apply these changes. So I'm going to close this window. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to run my sync. Notice that it changed both the hub and the spoke. It modified one record on the hub. It also modified one record on the spoke. It did it very quickly. It took about 2 seconds. And now, as we expected, we see our hot prospect for both of them because that's what we picked as the winner of that conflict. And the other changes that we made, like our company name, come through just fine because they were never in conflict at all. So that's how MirrorSync manages merges and conflicts. And then the last thing I've got for my demo here is just deletions. So I'm going to delete my record here on the offline copy. I now have two records over here, 3 on my server. I'm going to run a sync. And that was deleted off of the hub node. I want to point out that this, even though this was actually the fastest part of the demo, it was the hardest part of the demo because detecting deletions in a sync is quite challenging to do efficiently. You can't look for records modified after a certain time because they don't exist anymore. You need to get the primary keys of the records and compare them to a known list of primary keys, find the mismatches, and then delete those records. And that's hard, but then doing it on it's no problem here because I have 3 records, but if I had 300,000 records, that might take a really long time to do. So MirrorSync has some very efficient internal algorithms to scan as few records as possible to find those missing ones and to efficiently locate deletions and remove them. So before I move on with the rest of my demo.
Before you move on?
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah, good.
So can you just circle back a second about that warning that was shown? So who and when would see the conflict resolution message? So is that popping up in FileMaker, or does someone have to be running the MirrorSync software on their computer to see that error?
Yeah, the great question. Thank you. So if I were demoing this on an iPhone or iPad, which it's hard for me to do that on the screen share, but if I were, it would answer your question much better because it does actually happen on the device that is running the sync. So if I were on an iPhone and I clicked sync, that dialog that says there's a conflict would appear on the iPhone, and the user on the iPhone would click the resolve button and it would pop open Safari on the iPhone, and they would get that color-coded conflict resolution screen on the iPhone or iPad or whatever device they're on. They would make their choices there, jump back to FileMaker Go, and then rerun the sync. They don't need to install any software to do it because it's just using a combination of FileMaker scripting and the built-in Safari browser. Let's say that you have, let's just say that you maybe don't trust your users to do that correctly. I'm going to show you how you can change that. So now what I'm in is sorry, I should have explained this before I just started jumping and doing stuff. Let me cancel that here. This is the MirrorSync configuration client. So once you install MirrorSync on your server, you'll get this application that you can use to create your sync configurations. And I'm going to skip past a lot of the things on the screen because I didn't really budget time for walking through a whole MirrorSync configuration setup. But I do want to show you one specific screen in the setup process. So I'll just quickly talk through these screens. This is where I configure my hub database, which is FileMaker starting point, hosted on this FileMaker server. Some of these errors are because I'm just running it locally on my own laptop, so I'm just going to ignore them. And I'm going to kind of just speed through some of these screens. This is where I pick which tables I want to sync. You can see these are all the tables that are all of my demos are happening in the contacts table. which is right here under contacts, but we're actually syncing, I think about 20 or 25 tables in the solution. Here's the screen that I wanted to show you to answer your question better. So this is where you can configure some of the optional behavior about MirrorSync during the sync. And the two things I want to focus on are these last two, field merging and conflicts. I have it selected, this is the default, to merge the changes together. So you saw me do that. When I modified the email address on one and the phone number on the other, MirrorSync merged those together. I could have selected this, don't merge. And then MirrorSync would have treated that as a conflict, just like the other one, and it would popped up a screen saying there's a conflict between these two records. You need to figure that out and fix that. But I'm going to leave that and merge the changes together. The one that I think is most relevant to your question is these choices down here. So let's talk about what these mean. The one I've been demoing here is user picks, and that's what you saw. The user, the one who's actually running the sync, is going to get the conflict resolution screen, and they're going to pick which records win the conflict. You have three other choices besides that. You got most recent change wins. That means that if you changed it at 12:30 and I changed it at 12:45, it would just assume that my changes having happened after yours must be more correct. And it would take those and it would never prompt the user at all. So that is a choice that you can make. Another choice, which I actually don't recommend, but I'll just talk about it to be complete here, is hub always wins, which basically says whatever's on the server must be more important than what is on the iPad. I can't see a valid use case for that, but people have asked me for it, so I've added it. The last one is the one that I think is the most interesting, which is email administrator. In this case, what's going to happen is the user is going to get a message saying a conflict occurred, but they won't get a button to resolve it. Instead, an email will automatically be sent to this email address, jesse@360works.com, and it'll have a link in it, and the link will take them to the same, an administrator will then go to the same color-coded conflict resolution screen, and they will be the ones who will pick which changes should be kept and which ones shouldn't. And after they resolve it, they would reply, they would just notify the user, hey, try your sync again. And then when the user syncs, it would apply whatever selections the administrator had made on that conflict resolution.
Okay, that's great. I just have a follow-up. So is there, obviously it's not in this version, but is there any plans to allow additional email addresses for different situations? So like, as someone who's set up the MirrorSync for the client, I have listed myself as the administrative email to receive any of the errors that would surface. But if the client wanted the conflict resolution, I don't want to be sent the email. The client should be able to get that notification to be able to resolve it.
I will put that in the feature requests. I understand exactly what you mean. Separate emails for error notification.
Or perhaps maybe a Slack notification would be more appropriate.
Well, not everyone uses Slack. I think we as developers use it, but I know the customers we work with don't use Slack. I think email would be the most efficient way.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying. I think the way I would resolve that for now is I would change the email address to be some group email that would go to you as well as the administrator for the conflict resolutions. You would both get error emails and you'd both get conflict resolutions, and you would just need to know, hey, this is a conflict. This doesn't apply to me. I'm going to ignore it. So, I mean, I think that's how I would do it for now, but I will definitely take that into consideration for a future version. Thank you for the question, by the way.
Sure. I think another option, this might be harder to implement, but where you had the option for the message being shown to the user, if there was a way for you to like specify a specific FileMaker user that would get that message versus the person who last clicked the sync.
We can't pop up an error message on somebody else's FileMaker Go, but we could send an email to a different person. Is that what you're asking for?
Well, no, I was thinking about individual. Well, let's maybe follow up with another question. So what if you're doing a server to server sync? who then gets the error message?
That would always, so the user picks option is not available for server-to-server sync. So that would always be one of the other three choices, either the most recent wins, or the hub wins, or email the administrator.
Yeah, the reason I ask is I have a potential project coming up where we're suggesting MirrorSync as a solution.
Mhm.
And this kind of came up with how are you going to resolve conflicts?
Right.
So, yeah.
If this is something that is like a showstopper for the client, or if it's important for the client, please contact me separately, and we can talk about, implementing something to make it work for that client.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, cool. So what I want to, so that's the over. Any other questions? That was really good questions there. Any other questions on kind of like how MirrorSync works before I keep going?
Yes.
Yeah.
Selective data for selective users.
Oh, so like certain people get certain records?
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So if I look at the hosted hub database and I go to scripts, there's a script in here. Let me make this resize this so I can see it better. My Zoom window is on top of some of these things. I need to make it smaller.
Oh, just a footnote on FM25. If you've got collapsed script steps, drag and drop behaves erratically. If it copies only certain pieces of data, and it seems to be random. So don't drag and drop collapsed text yet.
Okay. I'm learning a whole lot about things to be careful of on this call. I learned from Ron about be careful about WebDirect and using charts.
That one's good to know. Thanks, Kirk.
So here's the MirrorSync 6 script, and you copy and paste this in when you configure MirrorSync. And basically about a third of the way down from this, so all the stuff in the upper portion, in the upper third, is all just kind of stuff that is standard MirrorSync stuff. There are some things you can configure and customize up here, but that's not relevant exactly to your question. This lets you control things like, for instance, do you want to show a dialog to the user after the sync finishes or not? So you can or like custom file name, if you want to automatically rename the file to something specific to this user when they download the file. So there's some things you can customize up here, but to do the thing you're talking about, you come about a third of the way down the file and to customization instructions. And these are the actions that you can customize. Set preferences, will sync, find change, show message, did insert, did update, will delete, did sync. And so like, for instance, did insert is a customization that you can make so that every time a record is newly inserted, you can take some action, like setting a default value for it.
To help, Jesse, to help frame this, at least from what I'm thinking here, is if I've got 10 tow truck drivers or 10 people doing service delivery of different trucks, they only have certain jobs that are theirs.
Yes.
So that's the use case I'm trying to figure out right here.
Right. So you would want to customize the find changes section. And specifically, you would want to customize it on the hub. If customizations that you do on the hub will apply to what records the spoke receives when it does that. So here's the find changes section for the hub. And rather than kind of walk through all the documentation, I'll just give you this example. So here's an example of what you're talking about. You would say if get layout name equals, tow truck jobs, then enter find mode, and you just do a regular FileMaker finder. You would say set field, maybe you would say set field active to true, and you might say set field in the related employee table, only find records where the related employee's username. If you can use the get account name here to know which login, which user is logging into the system. And so if you've got their account name stamped in an employee table, you could do a relationship from the tow truck job to the employee table and say only find those records. Let's say that you don't have the account name, but instead you have like a UUID field. What I would do then is I would go to their staff table. I would search for the record by the account name, get the UUID, and then do a search in that. But you can basically do whatever, just use normal old FileMaker searches here to control which records you want that user to get. And then this part is really important. Don't do perform find, do constrain found set. Because MirrorSync will already have shrunk your found set to the records that are recently modified. And if you do a perform find, you're going to sync all of the things for that user, whereas what you really want to sync is just new changes for that user. So you do the constraint found set, and now it's only going to find jobs that are active for this geography, for this type of truck, for this particular driver. And so you get, 6 jobs for that day. And now it's only going to sync those 6 records to the customer. And it's important to also point out here that any records that don't match that criteria will actually be removed from the tow truck driver's device. It's not just going to skip syncing them, it's actually going to remove them, which is a feature because it means that by simply customizing this thing in terms of what records do I want to be resident on the user's iPad at the time that they sync, you'll get a rolling window that will automatically, if one of your criteria is only find active jobs, once somebody goes in the server and marks that job as complete, the next time that tow truck driver syncs, that will no longer match the find criteria and it'll remove that completed job from their device. So yeah, it's just regular old FileMaker searches. Does that answer that question?
Yep, it does.
Okay, terrific.
The other question I have is about database design regarding container fields on FM.
I have a demo that you're going to find really cool. After I finish that demo, I'm going to come back to you and ask if that solves the question. Because I do have a very cool demo about container fields. So what I want to show you now is the sync history database. So you guys saw that this was empty when we started, and now it's not empty. And what's happening is that when MirrorSync, every time MirrorSync finishes a sync, it takes the name of this database, FM starting point 24 USS X5. It sticks an underscore MirrorSync on the end of the name, and it sees if there's a hosted file named that, and there is, because I renamed this file so that it's that underscore MirrorSync. And this is the sync history database. Again, this comes with the MirrorSync installation. It's called reporting underscore MirrorSync. So I took this reporting underscore MirrorSync and I just renamed it FM starting point underscore MirrorSync. And I hosted it on the server. And you need to make sure that it has credentials to allow access to it that match the same credentials that you use when you're configuring MirrorSync. And then every time that a sync runs, it goes under here and creates a record.
Do you need a separate one of these databases for each file that you're syncing? If I've got, totally different databases, I'm syncing them to different people?
So currently, yes, you do. If you have, currently, yes, you do. If you had 8 different sync configurations and you wanted to capture history for all of them, you would need to create 8 different sync history files. But I had another customer ask me the same question. And I think, that is already on my feature request list. I'm going to add, again, I'm going to put that Kirk wants same thing. It was Chris Rogers that asked me. Chris Rogers with a single history table. So yeah, you're the second person that's asked for that. So I will pay attention to that. And I think my plan is to make it so that you can customize MirrorSync to say override the normal name lookup and just specify the specific file to always go to for creating sync history records. You can see each sync that I ran, which device it came from, the timestamp that it ran, how long it took, what the result was. You can see here's the conflict that happened when I ran into a conflict. You can see the spoke copy creation, which basically tells you how old their offline copy is. The sync start ID is very useful to us in tech support if you had a problem that you wanted to send to us. And if we jump into the detail on any of these, there's more information on all these screens. You can see the hub name, the spoke name, how many records are inserted, updated, deleted, etc. And if you really want to get granular with it, we send this, there's this raw JSON payload that has tons of low-level detail about like how long it took us to scan for deletions, and how many processing cores you have in your FileMaker server, and how many warning counts there were, and all sorts of stuff. And this file is totally customizable. So if you want to go into this store sync, this is the script that we call after each sync runs. This is where we create the record and parse out all that data from the JSON. If you wanted to put your own stuff here to do custom things, you could do it right here. And Jillian, this might be where if you wanted to make it so that the client's administrator got the conflict resolutions, but you got the errors, you could do that by coming in here and saying, send an email to Jillian. And so you might send yourself an email if there's an error, if there's a conflict, if there's a deletion that you weren't expecting, if a sync takes a really long time, if there's a certain number of warnings, whatever criteria you want, they're all there in that JSON data. So you can, after the script has parsed out the JSON data, and maybe you've parsed out the, some extra data that you care about, you can add whatever actions you want here to conditionally send emails to various different people depending on this criteria. So that might be another way to solve that problem you're talking about.
So the history database shows the conflict. Does it show the resolution of the conflict, or that it was resolved?
It shows the next sync. So we can see here, move this so it's not covered up in my Zoom window. We can see that the conflict happened here, and we can see that a successful sync from this device happened here. And then we can come in and see that this sync ran successfully after it. That doesn't exactly, there's not a message in that says this is a sync that was done after a conflict was resolved, but it does show you the sync that happened after the conflict was resolved.
So the conflict resolution actually reruns a sync then as part of that process?
It's up to the user to rerun the sync. So the user gets the conflict error message, they resolve the sync, and then it's up to the user to click the sync button a second time to run their sync again. We don't automatically re-trigger a sync. It just remembers what they picked so that the next time they run a sync, it will apply their choices.
Does that also work if auto syncing is enabled?
Yes. Are you talking about for conflict resolution, or are you talking about the sync history? Well, the answer to both is yes. The sync history will be created for every auto sync, which, I mean, if you're running every 30 seconds, you're going to have a lot of records in the sync history database, but that's fine. And the conflict resolutions will be applied as well. If you have one of the automated options like pick most recent, it's just going to apply those on each sync. If you have something that requires a manual intervention, like email an administrator, then each sync that happens after that is going to fail. It's going to sync what it can, but it's going to continue to fail until the administrator resolves that conflict. And then after they resolve that, then all the syncs will start working again.
And where are we putting this transactions database? Is that something that you have to host on the hub?
Yes, it's hosted on the same server as your solution. So in this case, I've got FM Starting Point hosted on my FileMaker server on my laptop. So I would need to host that history database on the same FileMaker server. You would just modify the name, and you would make sure that the credentials matched this database, but it would need to be on the same server. And also, by the way, the process that updates that record in FileMaker server, that happens on a background thread, so it adds no time to the actual sync. We don't have to wait to update this reporting database in order for the sync to complete. So it's basically adding 0 time to how long it takes your syncs to run. Any more? These are all really great questions. I actually did another presentation last week, and I got almost no questions. So it's really a lot of fun for me to get questions. Any more questions before I show you some of the speed demos?
What's the upgrade process between 6 and 7?
That is a great question. The answer there is basically none. So if you install the latest version of MirrorSync 7 on your server, everything is still going to work. All of your existing users with all of their existing offline copies are still going to be able to sync. You won't get all the speed benefits because there's a lot of things that were changed in the FileMaker script to make it faster.
Mhm.
But we made sure that the MirrorSync 7 process recognizes the MirrorSync 6 script and still will kind of send it. It'll only send it information and commands that it knows that the old MirrorSync 6 script is capable of doing. So it's still going to work fine with all of your existing users. What I would recommend is that you install it on your server, then update the scripts on your hosted file, and then encourage your users to get new versions of the solution when they can, when it's convenient for you, that have that latest script. And so they're going to get all the speed benefits. We
Awesome.
actually had an internal conversation about should we just still name the scripts MirrorSync 6 instead of MirrorSync 7. And we decided to keep them named MirrorSync 6 because it just made it way easier for the upgrade process. I mean, if the script names don't change, then it's very, very straightforward to just keep working with the old files, and you just replace the MirrorSync 6 worker script with a new version, but it's still called the MirrorSync 6 worker script because that just makes it super low friction to move from one version to the other version.
I have a couple questions.
Yeah, go for it.
So going back to the subset of records so the use case scenario that I would be interested in has to do with my client has a sales force that sometimes goes out on the road. And of course, they're only going to need the records that pertain to that particular area, that particular project that's being worked in that area at that time. So I love and I get how it can do the sync and only sync the records that apply, and when the records don't apply, it removes them. That was another great answer to a question I had, because one of the things is that once those salespeople are done, we don't want them carrying around a device that has all of these records in perpetuity,
Yep.
on their device. But the other question I had has to do with the initial sync. Is that set up so that, if they've got a couple active projects that they're working with, and they go to set up their device with the initial sync, it's only going to pull down, and you said something about you could do that initial sync on the server and then pull it down. Is all of that controlled in that same way so that they're not downloading a million records and then removing 999,000?
Yes. So that's a great question. I'm thinking of three different ways to answer that. So the first thing is when you create the download URL to get them a copy of the file, you have a choice of giving them a download URL with a full copy of the file or an empty clone. If you give them a full copy of the file, it's going to do what you just said. They're going to get a million records and they're going to delete 999,000 of them, which is not ideal.
Yeah.
So you would clearly want to pick the choice that says empty clone. And then they're going to get an empty file, and it's going to add the 1,000 records that they get. And so that's part one of the answer. Part two is absolutely yes. The initial sync respects that filtering just exactly as an incremental sync would. When they run the initial sync on the server, they need to specify. You actually saw that happen when I did this demo for FM Starting Point. Is the first thing that happened is it asked me for a username and password. It did that even before it downloaded the file. And the reason is because it needed to know my username and password in order to run that initial sync, so it would know which records I'm allowed to have and which records I'm not.
Perfect.
So yes, it does prompt you for authentication on that initial sync. The third thing I'll point out, which it's a little tricky to apply this to initial syncs, but it can be applied to initial syncs. There's also a feature that I don't generally demo called the MirrorSync user token. And what that is right here on line 10 of the MirrorSync script. You can set MirrorSync user token to be whatever you want. So let's use your example of these salespeople are going out to different geographies. Let's say that they have 20 different clients that they potentially manage, and they are going to visit 2 of them that day. But MirrorSync has no way of knowing which 2 they're going to visit. And so you can't just, given nothing but the name of the salesperson, you can't know which of those clients to do. So you would load all 20 onto their device. But let's just say that you wanted to either speed that up or make it more secure by syncing fewer records. That's where the MirrorSync user token can come in. You could prompt it so that when they run their sync, it pops up a checkbox. It says, these are your 20 clients, pick which ones you want. And this is a real life example. We have a place that does food code inspections, and they will pick the restaurants they're going to go visit that day. And it works this exact way I'm describing, is that you would pick a checkbox of, okay, these are the 2 clients I'm going to visit today. And then you put that return separated list of either the client name or the client ID as the MirrorSync user token here in line 10 of your script. So you would set that global variable, you would customize line 10 to set that global variable to whatever value the user picked. Then when the sync runs, the MirrorSync user token is a special reserved variable name that gets passed from the client up to the MirrorSync server. So when you're doing your filtering in the section I was talking to Kirk about, when you're down here and you're doing your finds, I mentioned that you have access to this I mentioned that you can use the get account name function to know the name of the currently logged in user. But you also can reference the $$ MirrorSync underscore user token variable to get any additional stuff that you want that the user has provided. So you would get the user's name as well as the IDs or names of the 2 clients they're going to visit for that day. And you could pare your search down even more to filter it to just the geography. You could maybe say how many days worth of activity do you want? And so you could use that user token to be like a number field. And you could say, find all records whose active date is between this many days ago and now. Anything that you want to do, you can pass in that user token. It could be JSON data. It could be very complex and large. It's just any piece of text that you want. You can basically set it on one device and get it on the hub, and then use that to modify how you're doing your searches.
Nice. Okay, the next question has to do with, I think one of the things, I haven't used it myself, but I was talking to a client who's used it in the past, and one of the things that came up was just making sure that people are synchronizing. Is there ever going to be a way that like the device can detect that it's made a connection, and behind the scenes it could synchronize on its own? Like maybe the user doesn't even have to open the database to do it. I mean, is that ever going to be something that's possible to where it can do it seamlessly without having to rely on the user to know that, oh, now that I'm reconnected, I've got to go
Right.
to the database and hit sync. And I know that's probably wishful thinking, but
So a few points in that. Number one is there is no way that we can cause a database to open. Like we just don't,
yeah,
there's nothing that hooks us to say, I'm going to open this database and run the sync now. I think we're always going to be limited to only syncing files that the user has open. However, you do have that new sync history database that I was talking about that basically lets you, as a developer, know when the last time any given user synced. So if you want to write your own script that goes through a list of 30 users and does a search for each one in sync history and sends an automated notification to maybe that user and their manager and says, it's been 72 hours since Rob did a sync, that would be a certainly feasible thing that you could do.
that's a nice solution. That's
Yeah.
definitely a very feasible idea of being able to do that. And
The other
just
thing
a message that says, hey, you haven't synced in the last couple days. Make sure that they open and sync. That's a good one.
Yeah. I will point out the MirrorSync 6 script is just a regular old FileMaker script. You can trigger it like you would trigger any other FileMaker script. So if you want to do it on open, on close, on timer, maybe when they click a save button or a submit button, if there is a process that they use to like submit an order, you could link it into that submit order script. Anywhere that you can call a FileMaker script, you can call the MirrorSync script. So yeah, you've got a lot of control over when that happens. You don't necessarily need to wait for them to click the button.
Right.
The one caution I would give you is, although it is definitely feasible to do so, I would not personally, if it were my users, I would not link the MirrorSync script to an on timer. I think it would be super annoying if every 5 minutes while I'm trying to get work done, suddenly a sync thing pops up, commits whatever record I happen to be working on, and then blocks me out for several seconds while it runs a sync.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have the power to do that. I would just say be wary of what your annoyance level is with doing something like that. I think it would be better to hook it into a user triggered action so that it's happening when they expect it to happen, not when it's just like when they're in the middle of trying to get some work done.
Yeah. Okay, one final question.
Yeah.
So, as you know, John Howell and Jonathan Fletcher and myself and a number of other developers are working on a conference, Full Access.
Yes, I'm aware of it.
And yeah, and we were definitely hoping that you were going to come. I know I spoke to you about it at Engage. And
Yes.
so we would love to see you there. But so what the question that I had to do with providing a Go solution for people to download, which we're working on having, a companion Go database. We have a hosted database for managing the conference. And so one of the things in that use case that the questions that would come up would be, I'm looking at the licensing page and I see, sync 11 devices. Well, what about syncing 100 devices for a weekend, but a weekend only? You know what I mean? Like, is that something that,
Well, first of all, I would be totally happy, just like we donated licenses to the YWAM project. I would be totally happy from just a PR standpoint to have you guys use MirrorSync for full access. And so I would be happy to get you licenses at no cost for that purpose.
we will
Um,
definitely talk about that at our next meeting, I think, because I think that's a wonderful thought. So,
yeah, yeah. And I would really like to come to full access. I've got at when John first contacted me, I was like, yes, absolutely, let's do that. But since then, I've had a whole bunch of family and friends that want to do things in October because
oh,
it's just a beautiful month everywhere. Uh, so I'm still trying to figure out whether I can personally make it there for that or not. But I don't have a solid answer on whether I can come there or not. But I would really like to come.
okay. Well, we'll definitely hope that you can make it. But yeah, uh, we'll talk about the using MirrorSync and all that in our upcoming. We have a regular Thursday meeting where the volunteers all get together to talk about stuff. So I'll probably bring that up and I'll follow up with you at a later date if we.
Yeah, that would be really fun. I would love to help
Yeah.
help with that project.
So
Cool.
as far as capacity goes, though, like 100 people syncing, is that something that's kind of where the question is coming getting to is what is the kind of numbers that we could actually work with and see, are
So
there
it's been a while.
limitations?
Yeah, it's been a while since we did benchmarks, but I remember we had an intern several years ago that when we were on nursing version 3, we had him do some benchmarking and we set up 250 virtual machines, 250 actual EC2 instances at the same time on AWS, and we had all of them syncing continuously in a loop. And that worked great. Uh, and so we are a lot more efficient in MirrorSync 7 than we were in MirrorSync 3. So I would expect that we never actually found the limit. Like we never we were like, okay, 250 is enough. We don't need to try 500 or 1,000. So I don't know what the limit is, but I know that it's at least 250.
Okay.
Um,
So
and
it's definitely capable of doing it.
yeah, and it would definitely be also important to optimize that. Like you wouldn't want to have and I want to get to Kirk's question when he was asking about containers because I have some cool things to show there with containers. But you would want to make sure that like some examples of things you would want to avoid syncing. You wouldn't want to sync uh, tables that have 1,000 fields in it, and you wouldn't want to sync tables that have like a 20 megabyte blob of JSON data in them.
Right.
Um,
And I think
there.
like an example of this, the limited amount of data that would be, people's the list of sessions and presenters and people's ability to save favorite sessions so they could build their own uh, schedule and that kind of thing. I'm sure would
Right.
be very light, you know.
That sounds great. That
Yeah,
sounds great. Yeah, there are ways to make sync slow. If we just avoid those ways to make it slow, I think it'll work really well.
cool.
Jesse, you mentioned one time too, like if your business logic has a table that you're constantly purging and recreating, that would be a candidate of a table not to sync because of the back-end UUIDs that are constantly changing.
Yeah, anything that is like temporary data that like a join table or a virtual list or just things that only need to live on the device, just skip syncing those. You can also specify different directions for sync. Like for instance, the list of sessions, that shouldn't be modified by the end users. So that I would make a one-way sync from the hub to the spoke. But then another table where the user picks which sessions they want to attend, that would be a sync, that would be a bidirectional sync.
So here's another interesting kind of caveat to that situation too. I'm building and have been building the database that manages the whole conference. We have another volunteer that's just doing a separate FileMaker Go solution for having a map and some sessions and stuff. And we're planning on connecting the two and synchronizing the data, at least to download the data and stuff like that. But could MirrorSync be set up to basically work between two? It's not a situation where you're taking an identical copy of one database and syncing it to, the hosted version. This would be, can you have a separate database that's different, but be able to sync the data, utilize
Yes,
the same data?
absolutely. I'm going to jump back into the screen. I was kind of like I said to Jillian, I was kind of skimming past certain of these screens, but I'm going to come back to here and dwell a little bit more on this screen I want to show you. So this is the spoke configuration screen. And this is where you specify, there aren't nearly as many options in this screen, but the one that I want to point out here is this one option here is sync with an empty clone or complete copy of the main file. But then you've got this other option, sync with a separate mobile file. And you would just pick some other server, some other file that's hosted on the same server. And presumably an empty file.
Yeah.
And that would then become the mobile file. And you don't even need to have matching field names and table names. MirrorSync will actually give you, just like the FileMaker import dialog, MirrorSync will allow you to drag and drop the fields and tables from the hub with the fields and tables on the spoke.
Nice.
And so, it fully supports syncing dissimilar databases between the hub and spoke. But there is one important caveat there, which is that there must be a one-to-one correlation between tables and fields on the hub with tables and fields on the spoke. So, for instance, let's say that you had on the server, let's say that each contact had a related table of emails and phone numbers.
Mm.
But on the mobile file, you had like email 1, email 2, email 3, and phone 1, phone 2, phone 3. That wouldn't work because there's not a one-to-one correlation of tables and fields with those. So as long as your schema is similar, then you can make that work even if the names don't match.
Nice.
Hey, Jesse, what is your guidance on working with a legacy solution that's using external authentication? What would you?
External authentication is tough. It works. So MirrorSync is fine with external authentication. When you go to sync and you provide it credentials that validate against external authentication, it's just going to work. But the problem that you run into is how the heck does the user open the offline copy? Because the external authentication isn't going to work for their offline copy.
Yeah.
Right.
If you can solve, I don't have a solution for you there. If you can solve that problem, MirrorSync will do the rest of it okay. But yeah, I would think that maybe, there's really very insecure ways to make it work, where you could essentially just assign a shared username and password to automatically open the offline copy. And then it could still prompt the user for an Active Directory username and password when it's actually going to run the sync. You can definitely do that. The problem there is that if a user's copy of the database gets picked up by somebody that shouldn't have it, they're going to be able to open that and see all the records that the user has resident on their device, even if they're not going to be able to sync it and get new records.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you'd be a little bit on your own to figure out kind of a secure way to lock down that offline copy. But then you'll be fine. MirrorSync will be fine, and there's a variety of ways to make it so that MirrorSync you can either prompt the user for a username and password that is externally authenticated. You could share one credential for all the offline copies when you go to that's this setting right here, by the way. Log into Hub database using credentials from. If you pick FileMaker client credentials, the user will be prompted to enter their username and password. And that will then be used for the data API login to the server, which works fine with external authentication. You can also pick this Hub database credentials configured in previous screen. which is probably not a good idea if security is very important. But basically what that does is it means that everybody will log in with this username and this password that you configure for the hub database during configuration.
Got it.
Um, and so, yeah, it can work. And there's a variety of ways to make it work. And it can work securely between MirrorSync and the server. The challenge for you is how do you make it secure for the actual offline physical device, that offline copy that to give it some level of protection if it falls into hands that you don't want it to fall into.
Got it.
All right, I'm going to jump back to slides. I hope you guys are okay. I'm going a little bit over on time.
Absolutely.
Okay, I love all these questions. This is really a lot of fun. It's great. I want to be respectful of your guys' time. So we saw the sync history database. We saw the launcher database. We saw a demo of that. What I'm going to now, the next demo I've got for you is a pre-recorded demo that shows how this works with the iOS SDK. Let me move these other demo things out of my screen so they're not distracting. So what this is this Roswell Rescue application is something that we created using FileMaker Go, and then we packaged it up as an iOS SDK application using Xcode. And then we distributed that application onto the iPhone. In our case, we used a sync cable to do it, but it could have been done with mobile device management software like Jamf. It could have been done on the Apple App Store, however you want it to work. The point is, it's not FileMaker Go. It's the FileMaker Go generated native app. And so this native app here is a pet rescue application. So this would be used in a parking lot or a festival or a dog rescue place. And so the idea here is that you have this mobile capable device that can then be filled out with all of the information about who's adopting a given pet, the event that it's being adopted at. You're not having to worry about whether or not there's cell service at the event or whether everyone shares Wi-Fi data. And you can turn this off and on and put it in your pocket without having to re-log in. We're going to run the sync, and the sync is going to run. Nothing revolutionary here. I just want to remind you that this is not FileMaker Go. This is done using a native application. This is the cool part here. This is the new part. Everything I just showed you, we could have done in MirrorSync 6. This next part cannot be done in MirrorSync 6. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go onto my FileMaker server, and I'm going to make some changes to the look and feel of this system. I'm going to, I feel like this delete button is a little too close to the edit button. It's easy to click on an accident. And I wish it was like, I want to de-emphasize the color choice there for the button. So now so I've made my development changes. I want to distribute this to my offline users who are running my native application. I'm going to go into this MirrorSync table, and there's a database version field here. And you change the database version field to anything other than what it was. I'm going to change it to 1.1. Now I'm back on my device, again, not running FileMaker Go, but running a native packaged iOS application that I might have downloaded from the App Store. I'm going to run my sync again. I didn't change anything, so the sync finishes immediately. But now this is the exciting part here, is that there's a new database version, and then it's available named, and then whatever you named the database. Would you like to replace your current offline file with this version? This is new, and this is made possible by the launcher file. So what you're going to actually do when you package this application up to distribute it to your users is you're not distributing the Roswell Rescue pet application. You're distributing the MirrorSync launcher file. You're probably renaming it, maybe Roswell Rescue Launcher or something like that. And maybe you're giving it a different color scheme, but you're just distributing that 815 kilobyte file packaged as an iOS application and pasting in that download URL so that when your users open that packaged iOS application for the first time, it's going to run that initial sync on the server. It's going to download the already synced file onto the device. We saw all that happen already. I'm just kind of recapping it. And then critically, when there's new versions of the database, it works because we have that launcher file. And the launcher file, we tried to make this work with MirrorSync 6, but we didn't have the launcher file then. And the problem is in the iOS packaged, when the packaged FileMaker Go applications, every time you close the main solution file, it exits the application. So by making the launcher file the main file, we never have to close the launcher file. The launcher file can, in the background, can close and remove the Roswell Rescue application and replace it with a new version. And so now there's this seamless process to not only deploy applications on the App Store or mobile device management, but to keep those applications updated as development changes are made without having to go through like another Apple approval process to do it. And so I feel like this is probably, I feel like this is a pretty big deal that, you know, you can now use FileMaker Go to create very beautiful, rich iOS applications, which you could always do. You've been able to do that since day one of FileMaker Go. But the fact that you can now manage version distribution and be able to work on an offline copy and not have to worry about about basically your whole thing quitting out if the user loses network connectivity for 30 seconds. I feel like that is a big deal. And I'll point out one other thing that's not visible in this demo, but it's there on the back end, which is that all the syncs you just saw this happen, they're not syncing with FileMaker Server. They're actually syncing with MySQL. So it's just kind of a proof of concept that if you want to position yourself, not necessarily as if you can think of yourself at this point as an iOS app developer, as opposed to necessarily a FileMaker ecosystem developer. Because if you have a client that has a Salesforce database, an Oracle database, a MySQL database, or anything along those lines, and they want you to build them an iOS application that can be distributed on the App Store for either the public or like their internal staff to be able to use, you can build that application in FileMaker Go, even though you're not using FileMaker Server at all. Use MirrorSync to deploy the application, and whenever they make changes to the application and create records and stuff, the data flow goes from FileMaker Go to MirrorSync, from MirrorSync to MySQL or Oracle or whatever database you're using, and then the changes from that central database go back to the offline copy, where FileMaker Server does come into play. You saw earlier in this demo, I was actually modifying my copy. So FileMaker Server still exists in this equation, but only as a place to host your development file, so that when new versions are available, the users will be notified of the new version and they can get that new version to communicate with whatever database it is you're using in the back end. So did that make sense? Did I explain that well? Because I feel like I kind of packed a lot into a short explanation.
Yeah, I've been definitely sitting here going, wow. So definitely impressed with that. That's
Cool.
pretty amazing. So
Cool.
Hey, Jesse.
Yeah.
John here.
Hey, John.
Hi. Real expired. By the way, you know, October's a good time for take a vacation for your family down in Monterey or Santa Cruz.
That is a totally valid point. It's a wonderful time for motorcycling.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it would be really, really fun to rent bikes in San Francisco and ride around the area.
Come
Yeah.
on out
John,
and see
we
us.
can't
I'll
hear
do
you.
whatever. I'll do whatever. I
Can't
can
hear
do
you,
to
John.
facilitate.
Can't
you
hear you.
need to pull your mic over, John.
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. I
He
appreciate
always
it.
forgets that.
I have a new podcasting mic and I forget to pull it down. No, that's great. Come out to Santa Cruz or tour Monterey or San Francisco. Bring your family. Come to Full Access. I'm really inspired by this thing. You can turn it into an app. Of course, the first question is, that's an iOS app. Can you also make an Android app with this?
No, because we're not. I think LiveCode tried that, and it seemed like LiveCode made a pretty big splash. I haven't heard many developers talking about LiveCode in a while.
I can share some stuff about LiveCode if you want.
Yeah, what's your impression of it?
It fails.
Okay. Well,
Every time they've tried it for me and I've paid them to do it, there's something that they've overlooked, such as managed security or various other necessary details in FileMaker. So I've given up. They're very friendly and cooperative people. But I think if you wanted to use LiveCode, you really would have to be a LiveCode developer and build it in LiveCode, not using their FileMaker conversion.
That makes sense. I don't think I would want to retread that same path.
No.
It sounds like they tried really, really, really hard to make it work, and they know what they're doing, and they were not able to make it work. I think so. I think the short answer to that question would be no, iOS only.
Okay, I helped finance those guys. I was hoping they would make it. I was all about this. Yay, Scotland, go.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Well, they were doing, what do they call that when you give money to something that's when it's for, there's a term for it,
It was a
something.
GoFundMe.
No, it's like a founding member. They're collecting money, and everybody was pitching in $500 to try to fund them. And I'm like, yeah, I'm happy to do that. I hope it happens, but it never quite manifested the way it was hoping it would so far.
Right.
Kickstarter.
Huh?
Kickstarter.
Yeah, no, not like that. More like there's a term when you have like a flagship when you first start something and you become whatever, a member of that. I'm a little impressed by this. I'm thinking maybe we'll talk about working with MirrorSync, and thank you for that offer for full access. And then maybe next year when we get to the next rendition, we can take it a step even further. Dennis is the one working on our full access to go. It's called, like, just like DevCon to go or Engage to go. He's been building our full access to go system. We've been working together on that, and that's coming along quite well.
Great. Yeah, I think on the Android thing, the only way that's ever going to happen in a good way is if you get Claris to do it.
Mm.
And as an Apple company, the odds of that seem long.
Hey, here's a question we haven't been able to answer, but you might. I mean, you go to all these conferences, right? You go to Engage and you have booths and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, if you go to Claris Engage, what percentage of the attendees are working on Android versus iPhone?
I don't know the answer to that. What I can tell you is that we did not exhibit at this last Engage, and we were very glad that we did not.
That's too small.
It's the Apple campus is really beautiful, and it's really cool, and it's really neat to be reminded that they're part of Apple, but it's a terrible physical layout for a conference like this.
It's disparate.
Yeah. And it was, and it feels like the vendor area is like it's very much exiled physically from where all of the attendees are. And it's part of why I'm excited to go to Engage U in Belgium, because they are doing the traditional classic DevCon model where they've got a big central room where all the meals are served in that area and all of the activities happen in that area. And that's where all the, so we're going to be an exhibitor at Engage U.
Okay.
And that's where all of the exhibitors are going to be. So I'm really looking forward to having that kind of old DevCon style venue back again, where I don't feel like I'm like, it was really sad at Engage being like, we were just in this like little closet area off to the side of the elevators. And we just got very, very little traffic. So I know that's not exactly the question you asked, but I don't know what the answer is on it.
I just wanted over time. You've been to I've seen you at a lot of conventions, and figured you'd see how many people walk up with iPhones or in your client base, but you don't get a lot of conversation about Android, or is that like a non-starter, or should we not worry about it?
It's. I mean, I rarely get asked about Android. Now, I also rarely get asked about WebDirect. So maybe and I mean, Ron was talking about how much he likes WebDirect, and that's terrific. Maybe I'm just not stimulating the right conversations in the right directions. But no, it's rare that somebody says to me, "Will this work on Android?"
Interesting. Almost all my work is in WebDirect right now, in the drug industry. So
that's fascinating. I might really be overlooking WebDirect. I just have not paid enough attention to it, and I might just be overlooking a really good deployment avenue.
Yeah, I've found it to be, a situation where in a couple of different cases now, I mean, the majority of the users are able to, and it takes a little bit of development to make sure that you're making things work properly in WebDirect, but it's not that difficult. And essentially, they can't tell the difference between when they're sitting in WebDirect and when they're sitting in FileMaker, and other than it's much faster, and then you don't have to worry about them downloading the software and keeping up with the updates and all of that.
Yeah,
so it's worked out really well. We do have another question, and Jesse, Alex Seidler is my new associate. He's kind of my little fledgling underling that I brought on a couple of days a week to help me with my workload. But he had a question that I don't necessarily understand the question. It's in chat. Alex, do you want to go ahead and ask the question?
Yeah, I can. Oh man, that's
you got to mute yours. Turn off your sound. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. Well, I was just curious, back to the Android question. I have not used like the Claris or FileMaker SDK or IDE or anything like that. Is that because it's sort of a subsidiary of Apple? sort of requires it to be coded with Xcode in that environment? Or is
So
it something developing FileMaker apps, if you wanted to port to Android, can they be developed using like the .NET architecture or the MAUI or something like that that can port to either one natively?
yeah,
Ideally.
so we have actually built cross-platform apps
Uh-huh.
for customers using I think Ionic is the framework that we used.
Okay.
That was not a FileMaker backend. It was a MySQL backend. I think it would have worked okay with the FileMaker backend, but it didn't start off in FileMaker Go. So I think if you're wanting to take a FileMaker Go application and make it run on a mobile device, I think either live code or Xcode are your
Right.
only options. I think if you're starting off with just a if you want to build a full-fledged cross-platform native application, I think the right way to do it is to either write an Android version and then separately write a Swift
Mm-hmm.
Objective-C Xcode version. That's if budget is no consideration, that's the way to do it. Or write a native or write a web application in JavaScript and use a framework like Ionic to
Yeah.
package it up and run on both. And we had good success doing that latter option.
Okay. Yeah. No, that answers it. Thank you.
Cool.
One of the biggest problems with Android is it's virtually impossible to create a secure environment on an Android device. In my years as a CTO and CIO in major corporations, we would not let an Android device inside the firewall ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the trade-off, right? I mean, like, I think a lot of people like Android because it's so open and extensible. I think a lot of people hate Android because it's so open and extensible.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that is the iOS deployment demo there. I've got a few demos about speed. And the speed part is really near and dear to heart because I'm a optimization geek and I get really into threading and performance and all this stuff. It's really fun for me. So
you must like the new JSON parse command in FM25 then.
I am very excited about that. I remember it was funny because I was running the ETS version of FileMaker and Kevin Frank put out his thing talking about JSON benchmarking and optimization and performance. And I was trying his examples, and none of his examples came out the way that I was expecting them to. They were all way faster than his published examples. And I actually emailed him like, I'm not able to reproduce any of your results. And then I've just to try it, I tried it on the shipping version, on FileMaker 21 instead of the ETS version of 22. And then I got exactly his results. So I was like, oh, wow, they've really done it. I mean, it's like 100 times faster for certain types of operations. It's pretty amazing. So we're not 100 times faster for MirrorSync 7, but for some of the things, a lot of operations I've benchmarked are somewhere between 4 times to 18 times faster in MirrorSync 7 than they were in MirrorSync 6. So I'm going to skip some of these slides that I've got demos for. The compare record contents is 18 times faster. I'm going to show you that. Comparing container field contents is 13 times faster. I'm going to show you that. Deferred loop flushing. We alluded to this earlier in our talk where we were talking about complex relationship graphs and how much it can help to do the deferred loop flushing. And we talked about some of the pitfalls of deferred loop flushing and how it can go wrong. But MirrorSync is kind of a uniquely situated product to take advantage of it because in the case of MirrorSync, if you're writing all the fields in the table, it's totally safe for us to turn that on because we don't need to worry about modifying a foreign key and having that trigger some other action because we're modifying all the fields together as a unit. We don't care what the auto entered looked up value is because we're going to replace it with the values from the other device. So if you're running FileMaker 20.3 or later, and if you're syncing all the fields in the layout, we will enable deferred loop flushing, which makes either no difference if you have like a super simple relationship graph or a huge difference if you have a tremendously complex relationship graph. We have an internal sync database. It runs HSQL, which is a very high performance Java database. Now, when we write to that database, it's non-blocking, so we don't have to wait for one operation right to finish before we start writing the next one. So that's made a significant difference in every sync operation. And we've just done a bunch of FileMaker scripting optimizations for various things like concatenating text that just, not syncing kind of stuff, just in general, making FileMaker faster kind of stuff. Downloading empty clones is way faster now. In MirrorSync 6, we had to create a full backup of the file in order to generate an empty clone. So if you had a 30 gigabyte file, it would, number one, take up an extra 30 gigs on your hard drive, at least temporarily. And number two, it took a really long time to make that clone. So in MirrorSync 7, we are able to just generate an empty clone by itself without making that copy. So that goes way faster. And then this last benchmark is the one that I think is the most important and useful one, because it's the one that's not a synthetic made up benchmark. It's a real system for a real client. So one of our larger customers, who's an early customer named LifeSource, they do home health and nursing facility. They do physical therapy and they do psychiatric work. And so they give MirrorSync on an iPhone or an iPad to every single one of their therapists and psych evaluations. And they go out and they have hundreds of clients that they do patient visits with, and they enter all this in an offline copy of the LifeSource database. And then they sync it all back up to the server. And their server-side database, not including container fields, is 33 gigabytes. It's 136 tables. It's a real solution. And the initial syncs on that to an empty clone were taking 28 minutes with MirrorSync 6. We did nothing to the solution except for upgraded to MirrorSync 7. We didn't change anything else. And now the syncs run in 6 minutes. The initial sync runs in 6 minutes and 48 seconds, which is more than 4 times faster. So that's kind of a combination of all of these things: deferred loop flushing, non-blocking writes, script optimizations. All those things kind of combine to make that significantly faster than it was before. So with that in mind, I'm going to show this quick little demo here. What I want to show you here is, this is the LifeSource database I was just talking about. I'm going to go to a lookup table that's got 2,200 records in it, and I'm going to replace one of the field contents with itself. So we're not actually modifying the contents of the records, but we are causing all the modification timestamps to change in that whole table for all 2,200 records. So I'm going to replace that. And this is a pre-recorded demo, because what I'm going to do now is I'm going to jump over to MirrorSync running on MirrorSync 7 on the left and MirrorSync 6 on the right. And I'm going to start the sync running the exact same time on both of them. And so they're both going to run, and MirrorSync 7 just finished. It took 3.8 seconds. MirrorSync 6 is going to run for quite a while on the right side. So let's talk about what's going on here and why it's finishing so much faster in MirrorSync 7. In both cases, I modified all 2,200 records. But what MirrorSync 6 does is it says, if the modification timestamp changed, then clearly I need to write this record from from the hub to the spoke. And there's 2,200 records with updated modification timestamps. So we're going to write 2,200 update operations. And this looks like it's paused, but this is actually still churning away on the right in MirrorSync 6. MirrorSync 7 says, okay, I see there's 2,200 records with modified timestamps. Let me get all the contents of those records. And before I actually write them to the other device, let me generate a hash of the record contents and compare it to the last time I saw this record from the same device. If the hashes match, then even though the modifications timestamps changed, the record didn't actually change. So I'm going to skip that record. So it skips writing all those records and it finishes in 3.8 seconds. MirrorSync 6 just finished in 70.3 seconds. So that's an 18 times speed up there. And this might seem artificial, but it's surprisingly common. I can tell you from personal experience doing MirrorSync tickets how common it is that we get a customer that's like, MirrorSync was running great for a while, and all of a sudden everybody's syncs are taking 45 minutes. And I go and I get their logs and I look through them all and I find it out. And I'm like, oh, it's because this user on this date replaced every single record in this 30,000 record table that you've got. And now it's trying to push 30,000 updates to every single user, even if the records didn't actually change. And so with MirrorSync 7, this is now a solved problem. Now, if the records actually change, then we actually do need to write them. But even then, MirrorSync 7 is just faster in general writing them than MirrorSync 6 was. So that is where we're going 18 times faster. This next demo, and Kirk, this gets into your question about container fields. What I've got here is I've got an image database, and it's got 204 records. And I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a replace field contents. This time I'm actually changing the contents of the field. So for all 200 records, I'm going to do a replace field contents. So I've actually legitimately made a change to all 200 records. This is a photo database that I created. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start the sync running simultaneously. MirrorSync 7 in an iPad on the left side of the screen, MirrorSync 6 in an iPad on the right side of the screen. And keep in mind that this time we can't kind of cheat and not write those records because they actually change. We do have to write 204 records, but it finishes in MirrorSync 7 in 7 seconds. MirrorSync 6 is still going. So again, what's the difference here? It's not that you can see that modify 204 records. So we actually did write 204 changes from the server to the spoke. But what we did is we skipped the container data because in addition to checking to see if the record contents match, which they don't, so we actually update them, we also go to each container field and we get an individual hash on that container field. By the way, we're using the get container attribute function in FileMaker to do that. There's a get container attribute where you can request the MD5 hash of a given container field. So we do that. FileMaker tells us the hash of those containers. We compare them to the hash that we previously saw for that container, and we skip writing the container data. So again, MirrorSync 6 is still working on the right side of the screen because it's not only writing the 200 changes to the non-container data, it's writing 204 container fields, each of which is about 2 to 3 megabytes. So that's 600 megabytes or so of data that's having to write that MirrorSync 7 was smart enough to skip. And so we used to, this is part of our documentation overhaul, we used to recommend that you split containers into their own separate table for this exact reason. Because when you put them in their own separate container field, and MirrorSync 6 just finished on the right, that was 96 seconds. So that was 13 times faster in MirrorSync 7. When you split containers into their own table, they get their own separate modification timestamp. So therefore, changing just the non-container data in table A doesn't necessarily trigger table B that has your container fields to run an update. That information that advice is still not bad advice. There are definitely nice reasons to put your containers in their own separate table, but you don't need to worry anymore about MirrorSync having to slog through writing all the container fields over and over again every time somebody modifies a status field or a date field or a time field in that same record. Kirk, I want to circle back with you because I got the impression that was kind of where you were going with that question, but I want to see if I'm right on that or not.
Yeah, part of it, that covers one aspect. The other aspect is if you've got files on the server, containers stored as external references, when you make an FMGO file, those external references go away and the file and the containers are local.
Mm-hmm.
Do those still sync fine when you go back to the
No,
server?
unfortunately not. It will work fine if you are syncing on a laptop using FileMaker Pro. When you use the download URL from MirrorSync on a laptop computer, we will zip up the file and all the external container data, and we will send it all down to the laptop. And when you expand that zip file, it'll all be there and it'll all work. But iOS can't do that. iOS has no ability to work with external container data. So we don't even bother creating a zip file for iOS. We detect that it's iOS. We know it's not going to work, so we don't even bother sending that external container data. So when you get that file on iOS, it's not gonna work the way you want. There's two ways to work around that. Neither is terrific. One way, which is lousy, is you can open that file on the hosted server, save a self-contained copy, excuse me, save a self-contained copy from the file menu. I think that's
what you have to do to get it to go initially, to FileMaker go initially.
Yeah. And then and that embeds all the external container data into the single file. And then you send that single file to the user,
Right.
Which is crappy because it can't be automated. And it requires, you to have to do all of that work as an administrator.
Then when you sync, do you have to change the design of the server side code?
No, everything is going to work okay if those files are external on the server but embedded on the iOS device. That's fine. That won't cause a problem. So if you create that self-contained copy and send it to the iOS device, other than the fact that you have to sit there and babysit it yourself, it's going to work fine. The other option that you can do, if you don't have too many records and too much container data is instead of creating a full copy with all the container data, you can create an empty clone. You can give that empty clone to your customer, and then when they run that initial sync, the container data, even though your field definitions are set to save it externally, since iOS can't do external storage, it will actually embed them. So the records will wind up being treated correctly on that, because when they get inserted to iOS, they will be embedded at the time that they're inserted. The problem there is that if you've got thousands of or millions or hundreds of thousands of container fields, your initial sync might take a really, really long time. If you've got 30 or 100 fields like I did here, it's going to work great. This is actually what I did for this demo that I just showed you, is that initial sync happened on the server. No, I'm sorry, I take that back. This was not using external container fields, but it could have been. So yeah, those are your two options. And like I said, I don't love either of them, but until Claris gives us the ability to just externally reference things on iOS, that's what we're left with.
You know, the use case I was dealing with was we got this application had 460 screens in it, but I only need 11 screens in the iOS app. But in that, there was about a dozen container fields because it was pictures of the car, the driver's license, the owner, all that type of stuff. And just trying to figure out how to take and deal with that such that I had a much smaller FMGo application, but could still get all the data back to the server.
Now, if the data is moving from the iOS device to the server, there's no problem. The problem is only on the initial sync, moving it from the server to the offline device. So in your case, if you're doing a tow truck application, I would think that there wouldn't need to be any photos in there.
There are none.
Okay, well then that works fine. If you don't need to start off with photos, just go ahead and give them an empty clone or a copy with that's missing all the external container data. Either way is fine. When they go to take those photos on the iOS device, the photos will get embedded into the iOS database. But when you sync it up to the server, if the server is set to use external container storage, they will get split out and stored as external containers on the server. That will work fine.
We were doing that. It was just taking an hour to do the initial sync because it was syncing the entire damn database. And that was just a mistake on my configuration.
Even though it wasn't syncing the container data, it was still taking an hour?
But no, I was trying, again, configuration here. I was trying to sync everything out to the iPad and then strip it down.
I got you.
I wasn't using clone to get there.
I got you. Yeah, I think if you did an empty clone and you either did one-way syncing from the offline device to the server, or if you use the filtering stuff we talked about earlier to restrict the records that the user gets to a very small set of records, I think that would dramatically improve the initial sync time.
Yeah, somewhat of a mute point now anyway, but
okay, but good to know for future.
And one thing you could do after the sync has been finalized, if it's like a one-way push from spoke to hub, you could have a offline thing that goes and pushes those images up to Wasabi or S3 buckets, and then that way the end user could sync back, and all they have to do is open a browser or a web viewer.
Yes.
The problem is it can't guarantee cellular connectivity, and probably 40% of the time there was no cellular data, not even cellular voice, much less cellular data in the work areas.
Right.
So I couldn't do the S3 thing at all because there was just no guarantee the point of capture you had a S3 access.
Yeah, I think for that use case, just doing a one-way sync from the photos table up to the FileMaker server would be a good solution.
Well, even where I live now, I've got an LTE connection that has a 2 megabit down, 0.04 megabit up connection.
0.04?
Yep.
That's like dial-up modem speeds.
Yep.
Wow. Okay, I'm sorry. I think this is my last demo. I want to talk about, so we've kind of alluded to server-side initial syncs. And actually some of the conversations we've been having right now about how long initial syncs can take kind of reinforces why this feature is important. So I'm just going to do the demo and then I'll kind of talk as it goes. So the first thing that's going to happen, so what I'm doing right now is I have I've created a download URL in MirrorSync with the option specified to run the initial sync on the server with an empty clone. And I've sent that download to my user. So the user is now on their iPad clicking that link, and this is the screen that they get. So they're prompted for their admin and username and password. This field here is new. The username and password that existed in MirrorSync 6, but the optional email address is new. By putting in the optional email address, watch what happens when I start my initial sync. And like I've been doing before, I'm going to have MirrorSync 7 on the left and MirrorSync 6 on the right. MirrorSync 7 has a message here saying, I'm pausing it for a moment so I don't lose this. It says initial sync is running. You'll receive an email at demo@360works.com when the file is complete and ready to download. You may close this browser window. So there's nothing happening on the iPad at this point. All the work is happening on the server. So I'm actually closing the browser. I'm switching my email client on the iPad, and I'm just waiting for a notification from the server when that initial sync finishes. On the right with MirrorSync 6, we've got our sync still chugging away doing the initial sync. And let me point out that if on the right side we were to lose the network for some reason, the whole sync would just stop and die. And so our email is the initial sync took some time, but it's finished, and we've got an email link that we can click on to download this file. So now we download the file, and we just flip through the records to verify that it really did run the initial sync correctly and create these files. Now I'm going to run another script. This is an incremental sync now because the initial sync is already done. So this is going to finish almost instantly because no changes have been happening since the initial sync. And so there we have it on MirrorSync 7 on the left. We ran the initial sync on the server. We sent an email notification to the user, which the user doesn't have to have their device. It could be off in their pocket. They could have no network. They're not sitting there wondering if they've set their lock time long enough so that it doesn't fall asleep. Eventually, they get this email, and they just click to download the already synced file with no stress about plug your thing in and leave it running all night long and put a towel over the screen so that the glow from the light doesn't keep you awake or anything like that. They just get the email when it's ready to go and they download it, and then their initial sync is already complete. And so that is the initial sync on server feature. This is actually the very last feature that was added from a development standpoint, and I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't do it early because I feel like it's a really important one. By default, these initial syncs are retained for 24 hours. If you want to, you can increase that retention time. But remember, the longer you increase it, the more disk space they will use up on your server. If you set it for a week, then all those initial syncs will sit on your server for a week so that the user can download them for that time. Did that demo make sense? Does anyone have questions on that? Okay, cool. That is all my demos. So I've got a few slides. I've got like one slide about pricing and stuff like that. So everything that I've showed you is at mirrorsync.com. All the demos that I've showed you are available as well at mirrorsync.com. Like I talked about with the EPB products and Cindy, it's free for one device with no limitations or expiration. It's the full-blown thing. The only limitation is, basically one device has all the features of MirrorSync for free. And then if you want to buy additional devices, it ranges between $4 to $7.50 per month, depending on the quantity of devices. Quantity breaks start at 5, and then there's like 20 and then 60. And I don't remember all the tiers, but basically the price tiers start at 5 and go up. If you're doing a large scale MirrorSync deployment for like an iOS app that you're deploying on the App Store, or if you are doing like mobile device management to a fleet of users, we have special pricing that's not advertised on our website for 1,000 devices, and we sell those in bundles of 1,000. So just contact us at support@360works.com. Tell us a little bit what you're doing, and we can get you the pricing on the 1,000 device bundle. We used to have complicated server-to-server sync pricing. It changed depending on what type of thing. It cost different for FileMaker to FileMaker than it did for FileMaker to SQL, and we had all these different cost things. We've simplified that down, so now server-to-server syncs are all $115 a month per pair. So if you're syncing one FileMaker server to one FileMaker server, that's $115 a month. If you're syncing one SQL server to Salesforce server, that's $115 a month. If you're syncing 6 FileMaker servers to each other, that's 5 pairs of server, 5 spokes in one hub. So it would be 115 times 5 per month. The 360Works offers commercial hosting of FileMaker server. If you are hosting with us, we also include the MirrorSync hosting at no additional charge. You still need to purchase the license for MirrorSync, but you don't need to pay extra for like a box to run MirrorSync on. We have a dedicated high-end box that we run all of our MirrorSync hosting on. If you are a Claris partner, there's two things I want to tell you about. One is that we have a not for resale bundle just for your use as a company, not for resale for your customers or use for your customers. It's priced at basically a nominal price, and it includes all of our products, including MirrorSync. So if you're a Claris partner and you'd like to use MirrorSync for your own business or any of our other products, please contact us and let us know, and we will get you set up with that bundle. Also, if you're a Claris partner, we offer a 15% reseller commission. So please let us know. We'll get you a reseller code that you can use to purchase our products at a discount so that you can make a commission when you recommend our products to your customers. Anything you need to contact us for, you're welcome to contact me, Jesse at 360works.com. But honestly, you're likely to get a faster response if you send it to support at 360works.com, because I check that email before I check my email. And if you like everything you've been seeing here with MirrorSync and you don't really feel like doing all the setup work for it, or if you want us to review anything that you've done, or if you want us to help write the customization scripts or anything like that, we have a staff of certified FileMaker developers. We can do all the integration and configuration for it. We've designed it so that you should be able to set it up yourself, but we know that there's just a peace of mind that comes from having the developer, the software review it or do it. So we're available for that if you want us to.
Okay, so we recently did an install of MirrorSync for our clients, so they're using MirrorSync 6. So is the 7, do we need a different license to move them to 7?
No, if your MirrorSync maintenance is current, MirrorSync 7 will continue to work until that maintenance period expires. It is important to note that MirrorSync 7 is a subscription product. Our licensing has changed on it. It now works basically the same way that FileMaker itself works. And so instead of buying it, owning it forever, and then choosing whether or not every year you want to get version upgrades, it is now just a strictly priced per month but billed annually model where it will stop working at the end of that model. But if your clients, let's just say that they purchased MirrorSync 6 in December of last year, their maintenance period is going to be through December of this year. They can continue to use the same license key they already have with MirrorSync 7. They would just need to renew that MirrorSync 7 license key in December. Does that answer that question, Jillian?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Hey, Jesse, what would you recommend for like doing a failover server, having FileMaker constantly pushing data over to a standby server?
Yeah, it's definitely something that can be done. I've demoed it live on the Richard Carlton show. We actually had a really cool demo where we had, I think, 5 servers in 5 continents. It was like Australia, London, India, United States, and someplace else. MirrorSync was set to sync all of them every 30 seconds. I think our hub was in the United States. And from a failover standpoint, it's different depending on whether you want the servers to be in the same data center or not. If you're doing clustering in a single data center, the way I would do it, now this gets a little bit outside of MirrorSync. This gets into like more like network infrastructure issues that MirrorSync doesn't really care about. But if it were me, if I had servers set up in the same data center, I would use an Amazon Elastic Load Balancer. And all the traffic would come into that load balancer and it would round robin it. So request 1 would go to server 1, request 2 would go to server 2. It keeps track of both of them. And if server 1 or 2 goes down, it immediately reroutes all the traffic to the other server. If they are in different data centers, like we did it with the Richard Carlton, where they're all over the world, load balancers don't work because they're designed to work on a LAN. So instead, in that case, I would use a DNS failover. The downside of DNS failover is that it's a little bit longer delay. So there might be several minutes between when the server goes down and when it starts rerouting traffic. The upside is that it's not specific to a LAN, and so it can be used for failover between any places in the world.
Got it.
We were planning a much more simpler setup where the second server was set up in a location was a much slower internet connection. Mm-hmm. So the people there would access that server on their local network, but the people in the field would always hit the primary server, which was on a much faster connection. But if the primary server failed, they could just manually point the secondary server, which was online. It was just on a slower connection.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It requires a little bit more coordination, to notify the users, hey, go to this address instead of that address, but there's no propagation delay. You don't need to worry about whether DNS has detected it or not. It's just a
I,
much more direct process.
I actually set up a button on the home screen, on the splash screen, to be able to pick one or the other. So if they had a failed connection, they could just go back to the splash screen and pick the other one.
Okay, and the splash screen is like in an offline launcher file.
Yeah,
Okay, that makes sense.
the opening screen for the app.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So if you're doing a one-way sync from one server to the other server, would it matter that you aren't yet using UUIDs for everything? I mean, across 60 files, it's a very
Yeah.
large old system.
Really good question there, because MirrorSync fully supports serial number syncs. And if you were doing a bidirectional sync, it would be potentially complicated, but doable. If you're doing a one-way sync like that, it becomes much simpler because you don't need to worry about records being created on the destination device that are going to conflict with the serial numbers on the source device. In that case, and Stephen, I know you know the MirrorSync setup process fairly well. What I would do in that case is I would pick MirrorSync is going to detect that you're using serial numbers, and it's going to pick the MirrorSync managed serial number option in the config. Just override that to the developer managed serial number. And then for that, it'll just take whatever was on the serial number on the source, and it'll write that same value to the destination.
Got it.
But that's going to fall apart if you create records on the second server. So don't do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the things I talk to clients about is, they want a redundant server, and to do that, they can't do it on a Mac platform. But Windows is a much higher maintenance effort to keep Windows up and running.
Mhm.
So I tell them about MirrorSync and use 2 Macs.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's terrific. I mean, all of our development and stuff is done on Mac. So when we're testing this stuff out, we're testing it all on MacBooks, and it all works great. So yeah, that's a great scenario. We're definitely moving towards Linux for most of our like real deployed applications. But when we're doing development, I mean, we don't have any Linux boxes on premises. So if we're doing anything on premises, it's all Mac.
I have a question that's not truly a MirrorSync one, but related. Is there a way to detect whether you've got cellular data connectivity on an iOS device before you run the sync?
Not I mean, you could certainly just check a known endpoint and see what your error code is. If you get a 1631 error code, that's FileMaker's code for basically doesn't work. So I would go to Google, or I would go to some microservice, or something that is a low bandwidth, small, fast loading page that should always be up and running, and check to see if you get a 1631 connection.
So add that to the MirrorSync script.
that would actually, that's not a bad idea at all.
Again,
I'm putting them on a feature list.
A lot of these connections in places that just don't have the bandwidth or even the connectivity to do.
Yeah, this month, my client, they're launching, the San Diego airport's been under construction forever. And so I guess they just opened this month or next month officially. And so they're the pest control company of record for the San Diego airport. And so they have like 10 guys out there on the field, and they're constantly in the bowels of the airport that don't have any internet connectivity. And so they will go out and do their inspections and then come back to their office and do their syncs and stuff. It's pretty cool.
That's super cool. I love that.
They actually have barcodes on every office, every door, every place you go into. They scan it, pulls up the record, and then they go and do their inspection and treat the facility.
Stephen, would it be okay if I mentioned that in my slides?
Sure. Yeah.
By the way, just if FileMaker Go on a Mac OS screen mirroring is now live. You can interact with your iPhone directly on your Mac screen with a mouse.
That's cool. That's cool.
Now you can do your demos of iOS.
No pressure. No pressure, Jesse. One more thing to break. The FileMaker starting point demos, I've had those go wrong on me so many times, and it's never because of MirrorSync. It's always because I forget to commit the record that I'm on.
Mhm.
So I edit the record. I forget to click out of it. I go in and run the sync. I'm like, look at the change happen, and the change doesn't happen. I'm like, look at the change not happen. And then I sit there uselessly like fumbling around for a while. And then finally I like realize there's a dashed line around every field, and I click out of the record to commit it. And I'm like, there we go. But yeah, I'm if there's a way to screw up a live demo, I'll find it.
Hey, Jesse, I just wanted to ask a little bit more on, how to upgrade from
Mhm.
version 6 to version 7. I
Mhm.
was looking at your documentation and it didn't really address the whole addition of the transaction history database. So it might be useful to have some language in there about having to add that to your server.
Oh, you don't have to add that.
You don't
Um,
have to add it.
no, no. If that MirrorSync will check to see if that database exists. If it does, it will write to it and it'll store those records. If it does not exist, MirrorSync is just going to ignore and proceed on normally.
Okay, so
But I will put that in the update notes because it's probably something that people would like to do and like to set up, and it would be helpful for them to know that they can do that.
right, right. But other than that, it's just a process of just running the installer and
Yep.
everything just gets updated.
Yeah. Now that's the installer is the only step you have to do. I would highly recommend replacing the MirrorSync 6 worker script because that's what's going to give you the speed improvements.
Okay, you should mention that in your docs too, because that's not there. So, I didn't see it in terms of the upgrading from a previous version section.
Did you look at the with the hold on one sec. So you guys can still see my screen?
Yep.
There is a file here called important 7.x update notes. Did you look at this?
No, no, I was just looking at your documentation on the website. So
Okay.
for your support documents.
And actually, I don't say it in here either. Um, so it wouldn't have helped even if you had looked in there.
No,
Um, okay. I am
I
going
think it
to.
would also be helpful. I recently, I think you might have heard, I work for Portage Bay Solutions. So we
Oh yeah,
did
yeah. I
I
just
I was the person that wrote the tutorial and the customer success story. So one
great.
of the things I found actually was your previous Kentuckiana recording was the thing that helped me figure out how to do all of the setups. But my recommendation was that your documentation didn't have a lot of screenshots. So for,
Yes.
until you actually install the product, I couldn't really see, how to follow along. So I just thought it would be helpful if your documentation on the website at least had some screenshots of what that whole setup process and everything looks like.
You know, Jillian, I read both of the articles you read very carefully, and I really appreciate you writing those. I actually handed off the longer technical article that you wrote to one of our other MirrorSync developers, and I was like, go through and make sure that every single point in here is addressed as far as documentation. And I think you actually had an initial art version of it that was like a little bit blunter about the missing documentation. And I would not mind at all if you wanted to send me that original version so I could make sure we've kind of like addressed all those points. I really appreciate that feedback. It's really helpful.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, in my previous career, I was a software reviewer, so
Okay.
I could be a little harsh. No, they had me tone that down. They were like, he's going to be so nice, publishing our article. Maybe you should take out that paragraph. I'm like, all right, I don't have a problem with that.
But yes, send me the original version that you had because I don't have, I've just got the revised version. Send me that original version that you had. I just want to make sure that we're going through it with a fine tooth comb and addressing all your points about the documentation.
Okay,
Yeah. Thank you very much for writing that.
sure.
All right. So I've got just one last slide, which is the same slide you've already seen, but just to remind everybody kind of what's new in MirrorSync 7. We've got the iOS SDK stuff with all the deployment and the version updates, server-side initial syncs with the email notifications. The launcher file is now much, much easier for users to get those and work with those instead of giving them a download URL. Multi-file solutions are supported in the launcher file. You saw the side-by-side demo showing how much faster MirrorSync 7 is than MirrorSync 6. Didn't demo the developer features for the most part, but just to restate, we've got the sync history database, the admin API, and the all new documentation, which with Jillian's help is going to be even better. And so thank you guys a lot for getting on this with me, and thanks for staying for some extra time. It's so much fun for me when it's really interactive like this, and when you guys have things to bring up. So this has been a really great session for me. Thank you guys very, very much.
Yeah, the time has flown. We've eaten up, more time than we usually do, it's fantastic. The time has flown by because it's been such a great conversation. So really enjoy having you every time you come on. So thank you for being here and presenting.
All right. Well,
Appreciate
terrific.
it.
And John, I will get in touch with you about the conference.
I think John already stepped out. He had
All
to,
right. Sounds good.
yeah, he had to go, but yeah.
Chat or reach out to.
So
Great.
all right.
All right.
Well, I guess that'll do it. We'll wrap it up for this July edition of the Kentuckiana Developers Group. So everybody have a wonderful day, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys.